Hey guys, it's Kelly with St. Johns County Parks and Recreation. I typically bring you really cool, engaging talks about our wildlife and natural areas here in St. Johns County. But today I want to talk to you about something really important that can have huge impacts on our natural areas, which are hurricanes. So first and foremost, for those of you who don't know, I work for St. Johns County. St. Johns County is a long linear county that is particularly susceptible in the event of a hurricane due to the amount of water we have surrounding us. So we have 42 miles of coastline along the Atlantic Ocean that are susceptible to damage along the storm coming, from our east side. We also have in the middle there the intercoastal waterways and the Matanzas River and Talamata River, where we can see flooding and storm surge in our marsh habitats. And then we have the St. Johns River, where we can also see flooding and storm surge, but we also see flooding from rain and from collection of water. So a lot of our watersheds flow into the St. Johns River, and so that collection of rainfall heading towards the river where it gets backed up can also lead to flooding. Now, I specifically work for our Parks and Recreation Department. Our Parks and Recreation Department is a diverse department. We have beach access, we have playgrounds, we have waterway access, we have ball fields, we have trails. And know that when a storm comes, we're preparing all of these facilities for storms. We're making sure that if a storm hits, that we are minimizing the amount of damage to public land. Now, I have the coolest job in the world. I work as a parks naturalist, and my job is to bring people to our natural areas, educate them about our natural areas, and although it looks a little different now given the times, you can still come out and join us for programs. We're still doing outdoor programming. Now, it looks a little different than what you see in the picture on your screen here at one of my previous beach walks from the year before. So it's not going to look like that. It's going to be a smaller group. You guys will social distance, but we are outside. So if you want to get out and do something and you want it to be minimal risk, figure out what the Parks and Recreation Department's doing. You can get our newsletter once a month and join us for some kayak trips and some beach walks and some night hikes and all sorts of other cool stuff. In addition to all of that, I also am hands-on working in the field a lot, doing invasive species surveys and management plans. So today we're going to talk about hurricanes, but you may have heard these other words thrown around: typhoon, typhoon, or cyclone. I just put them both together. So here in the United States, on the Atlantic coast and on the Pacific coast, we call tropical storms that strengthen in intensity hurricanes. So all of these storms you notice originate along the equator. That's where the water's warmest and where they get the term tropical storms, because they're developing in tropical regions. Now, if you go to Asia, they'll refer to these storms as typhoons. And if you go to the southern hemisphere around Australia, you'll notice they refer to them as cyclones. They're pretty much all the same thing. They're really large storm events that can cause catastrophic damage. Now, hurricanes are nothing new in Florida. So we have had a long history of storms, and this history can be mapped out online. So I want to show you this cool feature. I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint really quickly, and I'm going to go ahead and share my web browser because I want to show you a really, really cool interactive feature. So if you Google historical hurricane tracks, this is an app put out by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You can actually look up specific storms and get specific storm tracks. You can look up what happened in a hurricane season in a year, or what happened in a general region. So if we look up, for example, let's say 2005, that was a really active year in our Atlantic waterways. We can go ahead and view all the results for 2005. Now this will give you the Pacific and the Atlantic. So we want to just scoot on over here to the Atlantic. You can see that there was a lot of activity here in 2005. We had most notably Katrina. We also had Wilma. We also had Arlene. So there were a lot of storms in 2005. Now note that they are varying in intensity, so you can go up here to the category tab and you can check off what types of categories you would like to view. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tropical depressions and tropical storms off the map. So everything left at one point in its life cycle of a storm was a hurricane of some kind of strength. You'll notice the darker colors when you get to the purple, that's a category 5 storm. Now, what you can also do, if you see this little location icon, we can scroll in here to St. Johns County. We're right here south of Jacksonville. We're going to put that little icon right here in St. Johns County. That will give us a radius around it where it shows the storm activity that's passed through or very close to that area. Now, this database has storms dating back to the 1800s. Now, obviously, that data is a little less reliable than more recent data, but it's still super cool to see. Now, once again, I've hidden all of the tropical storms and tropical depressions. So we've got about 33 hurricanes that have come by our region. Now, I want to scroll in here because I want to point out something really important. All of these lines are the eye wall of the storm, where the very center of the storm went. So we can single out storms like Matthew. Now, if you look at Matthew's track here, you can see that when it passed us, it was actually well off our coast. That eye of that storm was off in the distance. This is really, really important to point out because we have really only been grazed the last few years by storms. We have not been directly hit. And a direct hit looks completely different than these grazings that we have been used to. In fact, looking at this map, I learned that Dora in 1964 appears to be one of the last times that our area was directly hit by an eye wall, the storm, which is good news for our area, right? Means that we're hopefully less likelihood of getting a direct hit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the case. You'll notice a lot of the storms come from southwest Florida and up through our region, and then some take the path of Matthew and skirt our coast. This is a really cool feature. You can play around on here for a while. You can change the distance from where you were looking. You can change specific years. You can look at pressure levels. Like I said, you can single out all of these storms. So very, very fun to play with. Some really fun names. There was this storm Bob in 1985. So you can check it out, and you can do this for anywhere here in Florida. You can check it out and move this location spot. All right, so now that I'm done showing you that little toy, I also want to show you where you can get current hurricane data. So if you just look up National Hurricane Center, you will see NOAA's and National Hurricane Center's website. This is their main page. And anything that's currently active right now will show. Now, we obviously want to select the Atlantic because that's where we are. I am filming this today with Laura about to really beat down the Gulf Coast. So all of my thoughts and prayers go out to folks who are currently there, and I hope that people are able to stay safe. But this is a good resource if you want to stay up to date of what's happening in the tropics. So right now we have Laura, and I will show you some features you can look at with Laura. But we also have this X here, this yellow X, that is a disturbance that has a 0% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, but it's something that they are watching. So in the next 5 days, it has about a 20% chance of developing into a storm. Now, this storm potentially could fade off, not turn into anything, or can continue to track and potentially get stronger as it goes over warmer waters. When things are that far away, it's really, really hard to make predictions of what's going to happen. But when things are closer, so like if we click on Laura, we can get a lot more data and information, especially once they're way more organized, like Laura is. And you can get maps in here of all sorts of things. And one of the ones that I think people always look at are the tracks and what it looks like. So this was the current track for Laura. By the time you see this, you'll know how it all played out. But these are these cones of uncertainty that we watch, that we all hope, like Ross from Friends, pivot, pivot, right? We've all seen that meme. That's what we all hope pivots. But anywhere in this cone is where the eye wall will fall, not necessarily where just effects of the storm will fall. So those are two key features for you. You have the National Hurricane Center for current accurate information on what's happening in our tropics, and then you have the historical hurricane tracker for things that have happened in the past. Now I'm going to get back to my presentation here, so let me just switch on over. Alrighty. So, what's in a name? We have all of the named storms, like where did this name Laura come from? So the World Meteorological Organization meets every year and they determine what the next list of hurricanes will be. So they have 6 years worth of hurricane lists out, and what they will do is take the most recent list. So they will take the 2020 list and they will determine what hurricane names need to come off the list. So more than likely, Laura is getting off of that list. So anything that's a huge catastrophic event, anything that could be controversial or tied to trauma, they go ahead and remove and they will replace it with another L name. And then they'll take that same list and make it for 2026. So like Arthur and Bertha and Cristobal and Dolly, all of them were pretty small storms that pretty much stayed into the Atlantic. So there's really no reason to probably take those names off of the list. But like I said, like a Laura would probably get retired and not used again. You'll notice that there's only 21 names here, so they couldn't come up with enough U names or Z names or X names, but more or less it follows the alphabet. And so what will happen is if somehow we have an incredibly active hurricane season and we go all the way through the list and we get to that next one, we've used Wilfred this year and we have another storm, it will then utilize the Greek alphabet. So we'll start with alpha, beta, and so on and so forth. Now, hurricane season runs from June 1st to November, and that end of November is hopefully we're in the clear. But should we get anything outside of that window, should we get something in like December, it will then just continue on the naming for that year. So if we ended in November and the last named storm for 2020 was Sally, and we get a storm December 1st that is worthy of naming, it would then be Teddy. Now, if after November a storm comes in, say, February, which is outside of the start of that next season, which would be June 1st, because it's in the year 2021, it would go ahead and start with the first name on that list, which would be Anna. So some interesting things to note, here are some retired names, and a lot of them are very notable. You'll notice 2016, Matthew got retired. 2018, that the Panhandle got hammered and the Carolinas got hammered with Florence. Those both got retired. Irma got retired in 2017. Maria, which took a huge toll in Puerto Rico, that got retired. Katrina will never be used again following Hurricane Katrina in 2015. So any storms that are really catastrophic will go ahead and get removed. And so here's just a small list of things that were taken off due to their damage they cause. So how do they form? How do we end up with hurricanes? It's a crazy meteorological phenomenon. And to explain it to you, I'm going to toss it on over to Ginger Z from ABC News.
Some of the most destructive hurricanes that make landfall in the U.S. start as a group of thunderstorms moving west off the west coast of Africa. This group of storms feeds off the warmth and moisture of the ocean. Air rises then to form more storms and is replaced constantly by the surrounding air. Below all this air rising, low pressure develops. Riding along the trade winds and rotating counterclockwise, thanks to the Coriolis effect, a result of the Earth's rotation, the storm will keep growing as long as it has these key ingredients: water temperatures at or above 79 degrees. Ocean water versus land. Hurricanes don't like land. They need open water to survive. And high pressure above it. Weak flow, or what we call a lack of vertical wind shear above a hurricane, is vital to keep it intensifying. Now let's talk about the eye of the hurricane. Always impressive from space. It forms as air rotates up and out of this hurricane. Now some of the air that's being spit out at the top of the storm then sinks back into the center, keeping the eye itself relatively calm and clear. Immediately surrounding this tranquil eye is the most violent part of the hurricane, the eye wall. The most intense wind speeds at the surface are found right here in the eye wall, but they can extend, of course, out from the storm center. The most destruction in a hurricane comes from the eye wall out to the right quadrant. So you take the already impressive wind speeds inside the hurricane, add the forward motion and the storm surge, and you have a recipe for disaster.
Right, so did you catch that? Those storms are coming off of Africa. They need that warm water, they need that moisture and humidity, and they need to stay in that open water because when they pass over land, it starts to break up those storms. Now, the strength of storms are determined by their wind speed. Now, note it's the continual wind speed. What is the average wind speed that is consistent? It's not your gusting winds. It's your consistent wind speeds that determine what category a storm is. So you'll notice once it reaches 74 miles an hour, it officially becomes a hurricane. Anything less than that, it's a tropical storm and then a tropical depression. Now, category ones, as far as wind, aren't going to cause too much damage, especially here in Florida. Those series of storms early in the 2000s and in the 1990s really changed our building codes, especially in our coastal areas, to make sure that storms could sustain these category one, category two, even category three storms. So we have some strong infrastructure and some strong building codes here to ensure that these things that are unfortunately some more frequent than we would like them to be, that our infrastructure is okay through that. What you need to be careful of is the storm surge. Even 4 to 5 feet of storm surge can cause immense amounts of damage. So you can take a look here. Once you get past 157 miles an hour or higher, you have a category 5 storm and you have extensive catastrophic damage that is wiping out entire cities. We currently are seeing Laura at a category 4, and they're calling for catastrophic flooding and storm surge. So let's kind of look at the difference because no two storms are the same. There are storms that are big rainmakers, there are storms that are really damaging winds, and there are storms that have storm surge, and then there are storms that have different combinations of those factors. So let's strictly look at wind and what that actually looks like in terms of damage to our homes.
When it comes to hurricanes, each one's impacts are a little bit different, but the wind speeds that we talk about along the Saffir-Simpson scale, those are very specific, and the damage caused in those categories, kind of predictable. So let me show you. Let's start off with a category 1 storm. And the damage here, not too bad. A couple of shingles fall off, you can have some palm fronds bending in the wind, but everything basically remains intact. Category 2, that's where you really start to feel it. Look at the windows of the house. They can be hit from debris from the outside and already start breaking in a category 2. Your trees are significantly bent over in the wind, and the siding of the house itself can break, flapping there in the wind, adding to those eerie noises inside. Category 3. I've heard only a category 3, but it's not only anything except really bad news. In a category 3, you can have the door of the house blown in because the winds get so strong. You can have the roof of the house start to flap up and down in the wind because it's going to lift off those weak points, and a lot of those trees start to fall. Category 4, the damage is even worse. You get most trees falling, most of your windows breaking, most of your shingles fly away, and then Cat 5 is as high as the category scale goes. By Cat 5, no shingles remain anywhere nearby. The holes in the roof get so big that the walls of the house start to fall because they're not attached to anything anymore. There won't be any trees up in the neighborhood. That's just catastrophic damage. But again, that's just from the wind. And there are other impacts from hurricanes, and they all vary through the season. So stick with the Weather Channel to keep you safe when the tropics head towards your neck of the woods.
So that's a look at the wind damage, and he mentioned there's other things associated with storms other than winds. That's how we categorize those storms, through the wind. But one of the most deadly things that we see in hurricane events are storm surge. You cannot outrun this water. Water is dangerous. Water is what people die from when we have large storm events. Now what happens is we have our average fluctuation in tides. So here on our east coast of Florida, we locally tend to see somewhere around 4 to 5 feet change in tide just on an average day between low tide and high tide. Sometimes we can get closer to 6 feet when we have those full moon events and things of that nature. But if you go to the beach at low tide, you know the beach is really expansive and there's tons of room. And then you can see what the beach looks like at high tide, where our beaches can get a lot skinnier in some places. And there's a huge difference in the amount of beach available at low tide versus high tide. Well, imagine it's high tide, right? So it's already up on the front end of the beach. And then we have this huge storm coming. And so that wind is pushing all of that water up on land, and it has to go somewhere. And so storm surges of an additional 3, 4, 5, 10 feet can cause a lot of damage. So on our coastal side, we hopefully have, and we are very lucky to have in many places in St. Johns County, especially on Anastasia Island, really healthy dune systems. And those really healthy dune systems take the brunt force of that storm surge and that storm energy from the ocean. And this was really apparent in both Matthew and Irma when we had very minimal damage on Anastasia Island for the houses that live right on the beach, like right next to the dunes, because those dunes protected those homes. What we also see is storm surge in our inner coastal areas and flooding that comes up from the marsh. Now, we did see extensive damage in those areas from Matthew and from Irma. So the water is no joke. These storm surges and the predicted storm surge is typically one of the key factors that local representatives are looking at when they determine evacuation orders. They want to look and see what is the projected storm surge where these people live and what type of damage is that going to cause. How many feet of water will be in people's homes? How quickly will that water be rushing in? So it can be incredibly, incredibly dangerous to be in a storm experiencing storm surge. So how do you prepare for a storm? Well, there's a lot you can do right now, today, like after you watch this video. You can make sure your trees are properly trimmed. Now, don't go crazy, just the like dead stuff that could fall on something. And don't, please, 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 don't give your palm trees the hurricane cut. You all have seen it where it's like 3 little palm fronds left on that tree. When you cut back your palm trees that much, you're actually making them more susceptible to dying during a hurricane. You actually want a big bushy palm tree. That is the best bet that tree has to survive a storm. So when you trim palm trees in general, not just trimming for hurricanes, you want to make sure that you trim at a horizon line. So there should be a huge, full, bushy top on the top of that palm tree. You should only be cutting those really brown, dead things that are usually already hanging down on the palm tree. Sometimes they're called bearded palms because those dead palm trees just kind of hang down, or palm fronds just kind of hang down and look like a beard. Go ahead and take those off. Go ahead and take the ones off that are pretty much mostly brown. Leave everything else that's green or mainly green or green with like a little bit of brown. Just leave all of that. That will help the tree survive in the event of a storm. Make sure that you have access to all of your insurance information through your online accounts and all of that stuff, or if you have the physical paperwork. And in addition, you want to do documentation for insurance purposes. So if there are valuables in your home that you would be placing an insurance policy to replace, so furniture items, large screen TVs, anything that has a lot of value that you would want to get back in the event it was damaged during a storm, you want pictures of what was in your house. If you have receipts, especially if things were recently purchased, you want to store all of that with insurance documents so that if and when, God forbid, you have a storm event that damages your home, you can easily show the insurance company proof of what was in your home and what that value was. That will help your insurance claim potentially get processed a lot faster, and what is a usually not fun and painful process be hopefully a little less painful because you will have the proper documentation to kind of build a case as to why you deserve that claim. You also want to make a list of valuables of things to take with you. So anything you don't want to leave in your home, anything that you would be devastated to part with, you want to make a list of, because you do not want to be running around the day before, 2 days before a hurricane. Do I need this? Do I need that? Is this important? Oh my God, I forgot that. What about this? Don't be that person, okay? Sit down with your family, make a list and say, okay, we're gonna need to each make a list of things that if they were gone and they were replaced, I'd be devastated. You want to make that list. When the storm comes, you pull out the list and you just go and grab those things and you're not running around like a crazy person. In addition, go ahead and get those storm shutters ready. So some of you have storm shutter systems on your house, but for those of you who don't be the people at the big box stores waiting to get sheets of plywood, fighting people for a cart to carry the plywood. That sounds intense and stressful on a normal day, let alone when a storm is coming. So go today, get your plywood, go ahead and cut them all out to the shapes of your windows and things, and then store it in your garage, organized. The key here to hurricane prep is being organized and having a plan. You can cut them out, you can write window 1, south side, window 2, south side, have them all shaped up, they're in a pile. You're not fighting people at stores. You're simply taking them, putting them on the window. You're good to go. In addition, you need to know your zone so you can properly prepare for a storm and you can understand and interpret what the latest data and officials are saying. So you be like Augie, our gopher tortoise here. Augie is an educational, non-releasable gopher tortoise that hangs out with me a lot at work. And even Augie knows he's in evacuation zone A. So if you need to know what zone you're in, if you have no idea, you just moved to St. Johns County, you've never looked it up, here's what you need to do. So you need to go ahead, and I'm going to pull it up so you can follow right along with me as I'm doing it. Go to the St. Johns County Emergency Management page. Literally, you can Google St. Johns County Emergency Management, click on it, this is what it will bring you to. You will see on the left-hand side here, we have evacuation information. Go ahead and click on that. Now you can, in this evacuation information, get that map that Augie was looking at, or even better, click on My Evacuation Zone. It will bring you to a separate web page where you can input your address. So I'll go ahead and input the address for my office. So the Parks and Recreation office is located on Anastasia Island, so it is no surprise that it is in Hurricane Evacuation Zone A. Note that even if you're not in an evacuation zone, so let me pull up that map so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. One second here. There we go. So even if you're not in an evacuation zone, that's good to know. So anywhere here in white is not an evacuation zone. That doesn't mean it couldn't be evacuated under specific circumstances. So once again, stay in tune with local information and what local authorities are calling for. But if you live in this zone in the middle, you want to make sure that you live in a safe structure. So there are pretty much no instances in which a lot of our zones would be evacuated, but you could be in, say, a trailer in these white parts. So we want to still be in a sound structure if we are not in an evacuation zone. And all of those little extra stipulations, once again, will be released by the Emergency Management Department in the event a storm is imminent. Also know that if you live in one of these evacuation zones along our coastal areas, you don't have to travel far. In many instances, you just have to make it to a sound structure in the white part of the county, and you will be good to go depending on the storm. You don't have to pack up the car and drive all the way to Atlanta or really far away for hours and hours and sit in a car. But truthfully, you can go minutes, not hours away and be safe from a storm, depending on the storm. Once again, please follow local recommendations. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. So Augie here, he knew his zone. He was in an evacuation zone A. So even for Matthew and Irma, he got evacuated. So he packed up from his little house on the left-hand side there, and he grabbed his streets and he grabbed his little temporary shelter, and he moved into one of those white parts in the county, and he was safe. He rode out the storm and just ate lots of snacks like we all do. And so be like Augie, take precautions. If you're in a zone, go ahead and get out, be safe, and don't take that risk. So now that you know your evacuation zone, you need to have a plan. So where can you go? Well, if you live in the white part of the county that's not in an evacuation zone and you live in a sound, sturdy structure, you may not have to go anywhere. So you need to be prepared to stay where you are and shelter in place. If you do need to evacuate, think about where you can go. While we do offer shelter opportunities here in St. Johns County, if you have another opportunity other than a shelter, I would go ahead and take it. We also need to think about what we're doing with our pets. So we do have sheltering opportunities with regular domestic animals like cats and dogs, but things like horses, we can't do anything necessarily with them in the event of a hurricane. So you need to make sure you have the appropriate plans appropriate for your family and for your pets. Make sure that you consider your medical conditions. Do you have a medical condition where if the power went out, you would be in grave danger? Make sure you have a backup plan for all of that. We do have special medical shelters set up as well for folks who need the additional medical attention. And you can look at the requirements for all the shelters and sheltering opportunities on the emergency management webpage and through emergency management in the event we do have a storm coming. Things will look a little different this year in the event we do get a storm as far as shelters and sheltering. And know what supplies you need. Make a list of supplies, which brings me to my next point. Don't wait to get your supplies. Like today's the day. You actually missed the day. The day was before hurricane season started on June 1st, but don't wait to get them. Go out, get what you need today. You can get an awesome checklist from floridadisaster.org. I'm going to pull up that website to confirm that for you. Yes, floridadisaster.org you can go to, and they have tons of planning tools, but you want to go to plan and prepare. You want to go prepare for hurricane season. And on this right-hand side, you'll notice our disaster supply kit checklist. That checklist is all-encompassing. This goes with your checklist of valuable things you might need in the event of a storm. You're going to want to make sure that you have food and water and medical supplies, stuff for your pets. Don't forget your pet supplies. They need to eat too. Basic first aid, any important documents. So these are all important things, and you can check and see what you might need to restock on your home. All right. Another important thing to note is medications. So if you are on a medication that you rely on, that's very important that you can't miss. You want to make sure that in the event of a storm on its way that you get that prescription refilled if you're about to run out. Because if we get directly hit by a storm, a lot of the infrastructure and the ability to get things like medications to people will be broken for potentially days or weeks, depending on the extent of the storm. So I hopefully haven't scared you, but I've educated you, and hopefully you have a better idea of just how prepared you are for a storm. If you aren't completely prepared, go ahead and make plans to take those steps to be prepared today. We are coming into the heart of hurricane season where anything is possible. This is the time of year where we got both Matthew and Irma. So we want to make sure that we are prepared at home, especially in these crazy times we live in. It is 2020. Anything is possible. It is better to be prepared. I'm going to leave you on a positive note today, though, and say that while hurricanes can be very, very destructive to infrastructure and life, we can minimize those risks if we are prepared and if we heed the warnings of local officials. So stay informed, stay prepared, and let's all stay safe. Bye, guys.